So hopefully you can all see that. So this is a topic that's obviously very relevant to our current situation, how to live an antiviral lifestyle using food as medicine. And it's also a topic that's very close to my heart, simply because I suffered from chronic illness for many, many years. And I had a whole host of symptoms that seemed very disconnected and untreatable, and doctors never knew what was going on or what to do about it. And really, after many, many years of my own research and exploration and trial and error, I came to realize, or came to understand, that viruses were very much a part of the problem, along with what we face in this world in terms of the toxic load, in particular toxic heavy metals. And the way I learned to move through that set of symptoms and that chronic illness was by using food as medicine. So it has been an incredible healer. It has been my healer and continues to be my teacher. And I'm hoping today that I can give you all a little taste of that, because as we are facing what we face, food is becoming increasingly important in how we deal with things. So that's what we'll look at in a little bit more depth today. So if you've just arrived, if you wouldn't mind muting yourself, that would be fantastic. Just so there's no background noise. Whoops. So what do we know about viruses? Well, we know that they're very simple and basic entities made of genetic material, that's DNA, and a protein coat. And the purpose of the virus really is to deliver its genetic material to a host cell so that it can be copied, so that it can replicate. So the virus is completely dependent on a host cell for its raw materials and its energy. So it has this sort of parasitic quality. But that doesn't mean to say that it's always harmful. So it may be parasitic, or it may be commensal, which is where there would be mutual benefit between the virus and the host cell. So the virus only has potential for disease when the cells allow it to replicate. Viruses are everywhere and they're microscopic. So often they're so small that they're missed by the immune system. And they're also so small that it makes it hard to, it can be hard to identify them through testing. Because if they're not in the infectious stages, then they're hard to find because they hide in the organs. So this is what makes it difficult in identifying when it comes to illness, whether there's a virus there or not. So we have to go based on symptoms a lot of the time. So every time we breathe in viruses. They're literally all around us. So what do we know about coronavirus and the COVID-19 strain, which is what we're looking at today? So coronavirus is a large family of viruses that cause a variety of illnesses, which could be as simple as the common cold. COVID-19 is a strain of the coronavirus that was discovered last year in 2019, and it specifically targets the lungs and the airways. So the virus uses the cells of the lungs and the airways to replicate, and it then leaks its materials out into the surrounding mucus. So one of the body's defense mechanisms is a cough, because it's trying to expel the junk material of the virus. The virus leaks out these toxins that the body then tries to get rid of. So it's really, really important, and I'm sure so many of you are aware of this, that, you know, suppressing coughs and colds and suppressing our illnesses is just not helpful, because it's the body's way of trying to protect us and getting rid of what it needs to get rid of. So the more we put things down, like painkillers and antibiotics and medicines, the more these things can drive an infection deeper into the body. It can leave things lingering in the body so that it's never fully got rid of. But if we allow things to come out of the body, then the body can expel it in a way that's more harmonious. So our immune system is under constant battle. That's just the way it is. Every day we're exposed to many pathogens in the forms of viruses, bacteria, fungi, and a whole host of toxins. So that includes heavy metals, plastics, herbicides, pesticides, synthetic chemicals, radiation, and the list goes on. So we are literally bombarded every day with both pathogens and toxins. And really these are sort of a silent epidemic, if you like, because we can't see them or quantify them. It's very hard to get our heads around that we could be dealing with things in the background. So why are we not sick all the time? And this is simply because the immune system and our organs of detoxification are working 24/7, literally working 24/7 to protect us. They have to work very, very hard, and increasingly so. So our immune system is built in layers, and these layers act as a defense against the invaders. So viruses and bacteria and other pathogens will try to penetrate those layers. So if we have a strong immune system, then there's less chance that the pathogen can get very far. It may not be able to replicate at all. Or it may just reach the initial stages of infection, such as a cough or a cold. But if the immune system is compromised, then the infection has a much greater opportunity at moving deeper into the body. And the deeper it goes into the body, the harder it is to expel. So, it's really down to our immune system. The stronger the immune system, the less likely it is that we get ill. And if we do get ill, then we are likely to eradicate it more quickly. We're likely to have less of an infection to begin with. So what's our goal? Well, our goal really is to build up those layers of the immune system, build up our defense mechanisms to be as strong as possible. And really, a strong immune system is absolutely everything when it comes to our health. It's everything when it comes to our quality of life. Just a word on chronic illness in this respect. Chronic illness is a term that's used for symptoms that go on for a very long time and that are often not understood in the medical world. The medical world doesn't really know how to treat them. So these illnesses and diseases just tend to go on and on and on, despite medications being given or despite treatments being given. And really, people are more sick than they've ever been before when it comes to chronic illness. They might be living longer lives, but they're not necessarily living healthier lives. And this has everything really to do with the environment that we're living in. Pathogens, particularly viruses, which are becoming more prolific. And the toxic load that we're exposed to is certainly more prolific than it's ever been before. Particularly toxic heavy metals, which are very, very corrosive and harmful to the body. And when I talk about chronic illness, just to give you an example of some of the things, some of the illnesses I might be speaking about, it could be fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, rheumatoid arthritis, chronic acne, for example, hormonal problems like PCOS, fibroids, some of the mental health disorders like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia. So these are all diseases that would be classified as chronic illness. And they're all diseases that are misunderstood, even though the medical profession are doing their best. I don't undermine that in any way. But they're not understood, and the medical profession are not equipped with the nutritional knowledge which is required to move through these symptoms where medications can't reach them. So what weakens our immune system? I would say number one is fear and stress, or adrenaline. We live in a very adrenaline-based culture, so we're pumping out an awful lot of adrenaline all the time. And that adrenaline is very suppressing to the immune system. So that alone can weaken the immune system and then enable increased infection or illness. Toxins and pathogens ramp up adrenaline because they are seen by the body as a stress. And as I said, this chronic adrenaline is very corrosive and toxic. Radiation. So radiation is another one of these sort of silent in the background epidemics that we face, if you like, and also increasingly so as our world becomes more technology focused. We're exposed to greater and greater levels of radiation. And this is very, very prolific for diseases in children, especially looking at things like autism and ADHD, for example. Radiation would have a huge role to play. Herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, DDT. DDT is an interesting one. So many people would say to me, well, DDT doesn't exist anymore. It's been banned. And yes, it has been banned in most countries, but these are chemicals that get passed down the generational lines. So where our grandparents, for example, were exposed to high levels of DDT, our parents may then have been carrying high levels, which is then passed down to the next generation and so on. So actually this can be tested for, and we're seeing DDT in quite high levels in people today. It's very problematic, and it's very, very problematic for hormonal issues for women in particular. Heavy metals. So heavy metals are things like lead, mercury, copper, cadmium, nickel, arsenic, aluminium. These are some of the main ones that we would be exposed to. And again, they are everywhere. So they're in our cooking pots, they're in our paints, they're in the sky. It's very, very hard to avoid them. And they're direct fuel for viruses. So I'll come on to that in a couple of slides. But viruses love to feed off things, and adrenaline and heavy metals are certainly two of those things that they like to feed off, as well as DDT and the herbicides and pesticides. Any synthetic chemicals will be a great fuel for viruses. So heavy metals are behind some of the most widespread diseases today. So heavy metals on their own, without the combination of a virus, can cause things like ADHD and autism, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, depression, and anxiety, all of which are absolutely rife in the world that we live in. And the problem with toxic heavy metals is that they oxidize, and they often oxidize in the brain, and that toxic runoff then affects the tissues and the surrounding organs. So certain foods and drinks also weaken the immune system. So like I mentioned, microorganisms, they need to eat to live. They're a live entity, so they also have to feed. And there's certain foods that they love to feed off, like I mentioned, with the adrenaline and the toxins. But they also love to feed off eggs and dairy and gluten. These are three of the big pathogen feeders. And eggs in particular, because when viruses are being tested and looked at in labs, often they're fed eggs. So eggs are sort of a food that viruses have come to love, if you like, come to really love, and they're really not helpful. So if somebody is sick, if someone is dealing with illness, or if someone has coronavirus, for example, or any other kind of virus, then they do not want to be eating eggs. They want to get rid of eggs absolutely immediately. Dairy also feeds the bugs, and it creates a very sticky mucus environment. So when there's a very mucus environment in the body, then the bugs can sort of stick to it and hide in it, and it makes it very hard for us to expel the infection. Gluten also feeds the viruses directly, and it burdens the immune system. It's very, very hard going on the immune system. Refined sugars weaken the immune system. Coffee produces a huge amount of adrenaline. So again, you could say that coffee is a direct fuel for the bugs because of the adrenaline that it produces. Alcohol and cigarettes are full of toxins. So those toxins are seen as a stress, and that will ramp up the adrenaline. Microwaved foods. Well, microwaved foods really indirectly, because they deplete the nutrient content of our food. And that's absolutely been shown. Microwave food is really dead material compared to fresh living food. And then in turn, the immune system won't be fed the nutrients that it needs. So it can be a depleter of the immune system over time if you were to be microwaving your foods on a regular basis. And then junk foods and processed foods are not helpful because they're often full of high fat, high sugar, high salt, for example. So building a strong immune system, what do we need to know? The first thing we need to know is the importance of the inner terrain. So really, the reality is that we're faced with all sorts of things in life, and we are going to be faced with pathogens which have existed for centuries, forever, and we're going to be faced with toxins. But disease really comes from the inside in a way, because it's how we react to what we're faced with. So it's all about our inner terrain. It's all about how strong the body is on the inside and how well it can cope with what it's up against. And it's more important now than ever to build a strong inner terrain, simply because what we're up against is so much more potent than it's ever been before. So understanding what we're up against really is crucial, namely viruses, bacteria, radiation, herbicides, pesticides. We can call these the unforgiving four. And these unforgiving four are invisible and silent, and therefore hard to quantify until we're in a health crisis. And there's more and more people facing those health crises. So it's more and more important that we start listening to what's silent and hard to quantify in the background. And it's all about our inner terrain. So if the inner terrain is not clean, then the immune system becomes overloaded and clogged and unable to cope. So optimizing this inner terrain is absolutely key. And our gut health is so important. The gut houses about 70% of the immune cells. So having good gut function is absolutely crucial. And that's because the good bacteria in our guts communicate directly with our immune cells. So if we nurture that good bacteria in turn creates strong immune cells. There's this beautiful synergistic conversation that goes on between the two. And so we really want to nurture that environment as much as we possibly can. So, there's a lot of people today suffering with gut issues, and learning how to overcome these gut issues through the food that we eat is really, really important and very possible. So the importance of daily cleansing. So the body is constantly detoxifying and working to get rid of all the junk that it's faced with. But the reality is that our organs of detoxification are totally overworked, completely overwhelmed most of the time. And so our job is to lighten the load on the organs and learn how we can work with them rather than against them. And it's not the case that we're always working against them consciously or on purpose, but we're doing it unconsciously, and we need to learn how to work with them consciously. And it's really important that we know the foods that heal and the foods that harm. So we've had a look at some of the foods that are not helpful, especially when there's a viral situation around, for example. And we're going to have a look at the foods that heal. So cleansing practices. Cleansing practices are vital for all of us. And this has been how, for example, I moved through my health journey, was by learning how to deeply detoxify my body on a daily basis over a period of time, and use food as a therapeutic tool to do that, whilst also using food to build up my body. So it was this delicate balance of deep detoxification and nourishing and building. And that can be done synergistically. So when I talk about cleansing and detoxification, it's not about starving yourself and having to go hungry. It's quite the opposite. It's just learning how to use food in order to deeply detoxify. So there's this sort of concept of cleansing and abundance that goes on at the same time, which I think is such a beautiful thought, that we can work in that way. So one very powerful way of helping the body detoxify is to lower your fats. If your body is constantly filling up with fats, if the bloodstream is constantly filling up with fats, then it lowers the oxygen content. And oxygen is antiviral. Oxygen is required to move viruses and pathogens and illness out of the body. So if the body doesn't have enough oxygen, then it can't do that. It will really struggle. And then the inner terrain becomes clogged and congested with pathogens that are enabled to grow. So choosing healthy fats is really important. The more that we can rely on the fats from food, like avocado, coconut, nuts and seeds, and reduce our more concentrated forms of fats from oils, for example, then the more we can protect our health, the more we can oxygenate the blood. And a very powerful tool is to avoid all fats before 12 noon. So your liver has been working all night to detoxify your body, and then to allow that process to continue until 12 noon is a very, very powerful way of just giving the body space to clear out, to do its thing, to do what it normally does, but to do it without being overwhelmed. So the way to do that is to fill up in the morning on fruits and greens. And that's a very powerful way of detoxifying in itself. And then the second way we can learn to cleanse is by vastly increasing our fruit and vegetable intake. And I mean, really significantly increasing it. Fruits and veg are so important because they're packed with all these phytonutrients and vitamins and minerals that literally feed the immune cells. So it has these phytonutrients and these vitamins and minerals and nutrients. They have the ability to change the terrain of the gut, because it totally transforms the types of bacteria that are inhabiting the gut. And therefore, once we change the bacteria in the gut, we're then changing the strength of the immune system. So the key to supporting our immune system is to support our white blood cells that go after the viruses and the bacteria. And the way that we do this is by eating lots of fruit and vegetables, living live foods. So looking at some of the foods, the key immune boosting foods, and I've very much focused these foods that we're going to discuss around viruses in particular, because that's really what we're currently facing. So these are some of the most powerful antiviral foods that you can be including in your diet on a daily basis. So oranges and tangerines are, I would say, one of the strongest immune builders. Just one orange a day is enough to really rebuild the immune system over a prolonged period of time. If you can have 3 a day, even better. But oranges and tangerines really fight off viruses, and they are highly protective. They're protective from radiation, and they also help to deactivate heavy metals in the body. So once we have heavy metals in the body, then they require deactivating so that they don't cause any further trouble, and then they need removing from the body. So it's a kind of 2-step process. And oranges and tangerines are very much involved in the deactivation process. These fruits are also abundant in calcium, a particular type of calcium that can't be found in any other fruit. So it's particular to oranges and tangerines. And this form of calcium is highly bioavailable to our bones and teeth, for example. And on an emotional level, oranges and tangerines, with their vitality and warmth, have the ability to turn sadness into happiness. So anyone who's suffering with depression or anxiety, lots of oranges and tangerines are very, very helpful because it brings sunshine in. The citrus fruits, grapefruits, lemons, limes, these are also very, very powerful immune builders. They contain some of the most highly absorbable vitamin C, and they're packed with mineral salts and trace minerals that are deeply hydrating. So hydrating on a cellular level. They're very effective at expelling mucus from the body, so this makes them ideal for any kind of infection, because often infection and mucus go hand in hand together. And they're also great purgers, so they purge substances from the organs, especially the organs of detoxification, the liver, kidneys, spleen, thyroid, gallbladder. And they purge things like plastics, synthetic chemicals, radiation, and poor food choices. So that warm water and lemon in the morning is not just a myth, it's a very, very powerful tool for clearing out what's been accumulating as a result of the liver's work overnight. And we'll come to that at the end. So papaya. Papaya is such a wonderful fruit, and this really is a gut healer. It stops pathogens in their tract, and it helps to build up the immune system throughout the colon, and in fact the whole digestive system. And papaya, on an emotional level, helps us to transform and overcome challenges that at first seem impossible. And papaya is best eaten regularly in the morning on an empty stomach or following perhaps a celery juice. So any chronic gut issues, whether it's constipation, diarrhea, colitis, Crohn's, SIBO, any of these very, very common gut problems, then papaya really is your ally. Every day, papaya can be super, super helpful. Figs are a wonderful ancient landmark of wisdom. The fig tree really is revered as a landmark of wisdom. And these very wise fruits are the ultimate brain-gut food. So they help to promote this metaphysical balance between our heads and our guts. And they literally sweep through the gut, helping to remove unhelpful bacteria, parasites, viruses, heavy metals. They're also very supportive for building neurotransmitters in the brain and supporting the synapses and the neurons. So in other words, they're very helpful for the communication that goes on within the brain and the communication that goes on between the gut and the brain, which is very significant. And munching on a stick of celery alongside a fig is the perfect snack because it provides the appropriate glucose and mineral salts in one package. And this goes for any fruit really. This combination of fruit and greens is extremely powerful And that's because of the combination of the glucose, the mineral salts, and often the potassium. It's those three that go together. If we add fat into the equation, then it interferes with how those elements can be used by the cells. So when we eat fruit and greens on their own, they're used in an optimal way by the body. This allows for maximum, this allows the body to detoxify in the most appropriate way. It also allows the body to nourish and build up in the most appropriate way. So it's that twofold process that's going on. So that's why I say in the morning, having fruit and greens before 12 o'clock is one of the most powerful ways to not only detoxify your body, but also to build up your body. So wild blueberries are really incredible foods. And these are different to cultivated blueberries that you would buy in the supermarket. So wild blueberries are less available, but you can get them often in the freezer section of a health food store. And really they're the ultimate adaptogens. I mean, when we talk about adaptogenic foods and herbs, wild blueberries are just top of the list. Because they've survived and adapted to so many different climate fluctuations throughout the years. They could be burned to the ground and they will grow back stronger every single time. They're incredibly resilient. And when we eat these berries, then we imbibe that resilience and that ability to adapt into our bodies. And that's the beauty of working with food in this way, is that the qualities of that food are taken inside of us when we consume them, helping us to transform on a very deep level. While blueberries are also powerhouses of antioxidants, making them highly anti-cancerous, for example. And they're also big removers of the unforgiving four, so really help to clear the toxic load from the body. So if you've really been through it, then these are the foods you need in order to resurrect and come back to life. So spinach and all the leafy greens, really. I've put spinach here, but because it's one of the most powerful of the leafy greens, but we could include all of them in this bracket. They're all packed with beta carotenes that help to rebuild the lymphocytes in the immune system and help to make the immune system strong. Packed with mineral salts, potassium, sodium, chloride, that help the body get rid of the unforgiving four once again, and really are truly alkaline, so help to change the inner terrain. So when we get congested and clogged up on a physical level, this has a huge effect on us on an emotional level. It's very hard to be clear emotionally if you're physically congested. And so what the greens do is help us purge that toxicity on a physical and emotional level. Asparagus are wonderful organ cleansers, so they drive out toxins from the organs and prevent then new toxins from taking up residence. Very powerful adrenal supporters. So our adrenal glands are the glands that we use when we're under a lot of stress. So you can imagine in the modern world, we're using our adrenal glands an awful lot. And this means that the nutrients get depleted from the adrenal glands very, very quickly, especially B vitamins and vitamin C. So asparagus are packed with B vitamins, and this helps to keep the adrenals topped up when we're under a lot of stress. And don't forget that being ill, having a virus, for example, people who may have had the coronavirus or have it, this is a lot of stress on the body. And so the body is quickly depleted of nutrients when it's under that kind of stress. And asparagus, a bit like spinach, is very, very alkalizing. It helps to push out unproductive acids. So changing that inner terrain, in other words, from acid to alkaline. Sweet potatoes or yams. Sweet potatoes are an incredibly nourishing and building food, whilst also being very, very helpful at removing harmful bacteria or unhelpful bacteria. And they really help to, sweet potatoes really help to build up the body's own production of B12. We have the ability to produce B12 in our bodies, and sweet potatoes help us to do that by keeping the microbes at bay. So the more pathogens, the more pathogenic load we have in the body, then the less able we are to produce our own B12. So when we get sick, we often get very, very low in B12, or when our systems are low, we get low in B12 because the pathogens, because of the level of pathogenic activity in the body. Sweet potatoes also help us to get rid of unhelpful estrogens that we all face from plastics and water and the likes in our environment. And these place a huge burden on our immune system and also interfere with our hormonal function. And so sweet potatoes help us to get rid of these unhelpful estrogens. And they also help with sleep. So for anyone who doesn't get good sleep or needs help getting to sleep, then sweet potatoes can be very, very helpful because they have a particular form of glucose that helps to build neurotransmitters such as serotonin, GABA, glycine, dopamine, all of those neurotransmitters that keep us very calm and aid with our sleep. Sweet potatoes help to build those through the glucose they provide. And the aromatic herbs, rosemary, sage, thyme, oregano, these are incredible. If we could use a little bit of these every day in our food and cooking, or have them as teas, they're amazing immune builders because they help to rebuild the white blood cells, and they also help to kill off the bugs. Particularly helpful for strep bacteria, which is often at the basis of many of the gut conditions, for example. So we can make a nice tea. Thyme tea, for example, is delicious. A couple of sprigs of thyme, some hot water, and add some raw honey and lemon. And this makes a really lovely tonic, especially if you were currently dealing with a virus. So ginger is well known for its antiviral activity. It's antiviral, antibacterial, anti-parasitic, a very powerful immune ally. And it's wonderful because it brings the body out of a reactive state. So when we get ill or we're under stress, the body goes into a reactive state. And ginger literally helps the body relax by telling the organs to let go. So ginger water is an incredibly powerful thing to drink throughout the day. You could put a chunk of ginger in your water at the beginning of the day and just sip on it. What I like to do is grate some ginger and squeeze the juice into my water and sip on that throughout the day. And that's a wonderful way of just helping the body to relax. Garlic, again, is a medicine that we've used over the centuries. Antiviral, antibacterial, antifungal, including mold, anti-parasitic. It's the ultimate protection food, really. And it's interesting how the clove of garlic is created, if you like, in its natural form. Or the bulb of garlic, I should say, because the bulb of garlic contains all these little cloves that each of which are a medicinal dose. So if we can see it that way, then we can just take our doses as we need them. And even one clove of raw garlic a day is enough to be a very powerful immune tool, both for building and for eliminating unhelpful pathogens from the body. And then if you're sick, if you have something going on, then really increasing this to up to 3 cloves a day would be the best. And turmeric works on addressing viral issues throughout the body, and it acts as an anti-inflammatory as it reduces the viral load. In combination with ginger, really, it's at its most powerful. So a really lovely tonic that we can use if we're not feeling well, or if you feel like you're coming down with something, just at the beginning of when you feel like you're coming down with something, making a juice with oranges, turmeric, ginger, and garlic, and you can add some raw honey into that, is a wonderful tonic. And you can do that as many times as you like in a day. If I feel like I'm coming down with something, I may do that up to 6 times a day. Celery juice. So celery juice really has been big part of my healing journey, and it's really an incredible tonic. And once we juice celery, it sort of, well, with any juice, it potentizes the nutrients into a very concentrated form. And this is why we juice. This is one of the benefits of juicing, is that it gets rid of all the fiber, so that you're just left with a very, very concentrated potion of nutrients that the body doesn't have to break down or do anything with. And there's a great healing benefit to that. It's a bit like taking a herbal tincture. And celery juice is as potent as taking a herbal tincture. So one of its greatest benefits is that it's packed with sodium cluster salts that help to kill off infection, especially viruses and bacteria. And these salts basically act as an antiseptic for the whole immune system. It's also very, very high in vitamin C. That doesn't require any methylation. So most nutrients require methylation, which means they have to go through a process in order for them to be used in the body. But celery juice, the vitamin C in celery juice requires no methylation, so it's readily usable immediately. And very, very powerful for any gut conditions again. And gut conditions, as I mentioned, are extremely related to viral conditions. The two go hand in hand, because if our gut health is not good, then our susceptibility to viruses is that much greater. So celery juice can turn around gut conditions really quite rapidly for some people. And obviously that depends from person to person. But the effects can be potent quite quickly. And the way to have it is to have 16 ounces on an empty stomach in the morning. So we'll have a look at an example of the morning routine at the end. And cucumber juice. So cucumber really is a great tool for reducing fevers. It's like pouring water on a fire. And this helps to cool the organs and glands, which can become quite heated if we're dealing with an illness. So it's very, very hydrating, and hydrating on a cellular level, and helps to soothe overused adrenal glands. So if we're under a lot of stress, then drinking cucumber juice on a regular basis can be very, very helpful to bring down the heat. If we're under a lot of stress, the adrenal glands suffer, all the organs suffer, but the adrenal glands in particular, and also the liver. The adrenaline that's produced is very, very corrosive to the adrenal glands and the liver, and cucumber juice helps to counteract this. And raw honey. So again, raw honey, like garlic, for example, has been around for centuries, helping us to fight infection and disease. It's been used as a medicine since time began, really, and it's very, very powerful for strengthening the white blood cells. So it's a real immune builder. It contains over 200,000 phytochemicals that are pathogen killers, and that's quite something for one food. It has a very, very high mineral content. So if somebody is depleted in minerals, which is easy to happen in the world that we live in, we become very depleted in minerals very quickly. Also because our soils are quite depleted in minerals, and so we're not getting the same mineral content from our soils as we used to. But honey is very, very high in minerals, protects us from radiation, is highly anti-cancerous in this respect. It's a powerful brain food because of the highly absorbable fructose and glucose. So its sugars are very, very available in a form that the body can use immediately. And those sugars, don't forget, are surrounded by phytochemicals and minerals and nutrients that the body can utilize at the same time. So never think of honey as a refined sugar. Sugar from natural foods cannot be compared to refined sugar. It's dealt with in completely different ways in the body. Whereas refined sugar is refined, and so therefore all of its nutrients have been stripped away. All you're getting is the glucose compound naked that moves into the body. And in order for it to be utilized by the body, it relies on our own nutrients that exist. And so therefore it's quite depleting. It uses up our nutrients in order to be processed, if that makes sense. Whereas if we're using raw honey, for example, or fruit or maple syrup, we have natural fructose and glucose that's been unprocessed, all bound up with all of these beautiful vitamins and minerals and phytochemicals and antioxidants. And this is like a spark for the body. The body recognizes this as something that it can absolutely use. So it's a very, very different process. Like wild blueberries, raw honey is a very adaptogenic food, produced by bees, which are one of the most adaptogenic creatures on this planet, making it one of the most adaptogenic foods. And it's a real soul food. You know, it's a very ancient food. It contains an awful lot of wisdom. So it's really worth seeking out a beekeeper who lives locally. Even in cities now, you have beekeepers, people who are producing their own honey. You don't need to be buying expensive Manuka honey, for example. You can buy raw honey from your local beekeeper, which is as potent, if not more, because it has all the benefits of your local environment. And this is very, very, very beneficial for the body. And you don't need to worry about eating too much raw honey. You know, you can add a teaspoon or a tablespoon to your lemon water in the morning, and you can have another tablespoon later if you need. If you're sick, you can have as many teaspoons or tablespoons as you need in that day. It's a medicine, and it should be treated as so. So this is an example of a powerful morning routine. If you were wanting to eliminate fats from your diet before 12 noon, for example, then this is a lovely way of doing it. So if you're if you're sick, this is a great thing to do. But even if you're not sick, this is also a great thing to do. So starting your day when you wake up with, you may do already with a lemon, warm water with lemon, and adding some, I like to grate the ginger and add the juice in. And also I add raw honey in there. I usually make a liter of this in the morning. I use a whole lemon and 1 liter of water. I've put half a lemon and 500 mils of water there because that's what you can start with and you can build up. And this is like an immediate flush through. This is what helps the liver to flush through everything that it's been accumulating overnight. And it's also very, very warming to the body first thing. So it's a lovely tonic to wake up to. Very revitalizing, and also helps to get the digestive system moving quickly in the morning. And then celery juice. You follow your lemon water with celery juice 20 minutes or half an hour later. It's important to leave a 15 or 20 minute gap at least. And then you have your celery juice on an empty stomach. And this gives the celery juice an opportunity to move throughout the body, and for its mineral salts to really work into the immune system. And that takes a little bit of time. So really it's best to wait 30 minutes before you have your breakfast. And for breakfast, you could have a detox smoothie, which is just made up of fruit and greens. So this is a detox, an example of a detox smoothie. 2 bananas, 2 cups of wild blueberries, some coriander. I throw in some spinach, some dulse seaweed, juice of 1 orange, Hawaiian spirulina, and barley grass juice powder. So these are 2 of the sort of, if you like, superfood powders. I don't like to talk about these superfoods too much because I think it's really important that we rely on the whole foods as much as possible. And I think the superfoods are often vastly overrated and often taken out of context from their natural environments. But these are 2 that are very potent because they specifically work into removing the toxic heavy metals from our body. So spirulina, for example, is a much more potent remover of toxic heavy metals than chlorella, even though chlorella has a lot of popularity in the health world. And spirulina is helpful also as a protection from radiation, and it's very, very building for the immune system. So this smoothie is actually specifically a heavy metal detox smoothie. So if heavy metals are an issue, which they are for most people without us even knowing, then this is a synergistic way to help remove those heavy metals. So in summary, we need to know what we're up against. We need to know that viruses are something that we are contending with currently, and that we will be contending with in the future, and that we have been contending with over many, many years. But the reality is that they're becoming more and more prolific. And it's important that we don't allow fear to overcome us in that respect, but that we know this and we know what to do about it. That's the most important thing, because the fear is not helpful. It's important to know what weakens the immune system, all the elements that I went through. It's important to appreciate just how hard your body works on a day-to-day basis, and that it is always working for you. It's always trying to protect you, even if at times it doesn't seem to be the case. It might have funny ways of showing you what it's trying to do. It's important to know the foods that feed the bugs. So the main ones I spoke about, for example, eggs, gluten, dairy. Those are the top 3. And it's important to know the foods that heal and protect. So the foods that we have just spoken about. So that's it. Thank you so much for listening, and be happy and eat well. That's how I would like to end this webinar. And I'm also very happy to take any questions if anybody has any questions. It's best if you unmute yourselves in order to ask your questions.
Hello, Rebecca.
Hello.
I'm Annette. I've got my husband Neil here with me. We had a few questions we'd like to ask.
Sure.
Firstly, about figs. They're obviously very seasonal, the fresh ones that are available in this country. What's your opinion about dried figs?
Dried figs are also really helpful, but they don't, the problem with dried fruit, not that it's a problem and it's fine to eat dried fruit, but it doesn't contain the water content that the fresh fruit contains. So it can be a little bit drying in the body. So for example, if you're someone who suffers with gut issues, for example, if you were someone who suffered with constipation, for example, then that's already quite a dry condition. You wouldn't want to be drying it too much more. So it really depends on the situation, but dried fruit can be very helpful. Dates, for example, are enormously helpful, and dried figs in smaller amounts than the fresh figs is what I would. Yeah.
I noticed you didn't put olive oil down as one of the healthy fats.
Aha. So the reason I didn't put olive oil down is because it's one of the more concentrated, or it's a concentrated oil. So although in small amounts it can have health benefits, it's still a much more concentrated form of oil than eating fat from the food directly, if that makes sense. So oils in small amounts are fine in small amounts, but if you're dealing with an illness, if you have a virus currently, for example, or you feel an infection coming on, or you're someone who's dealing with chronic illness and you're trying to clear out your body, then even the healthier concentrated forms of fats like olive oil and coconut oil will prevent the body from cleansing and detoxifying in the best way that it can. So any fat coming into the system is a burden on the liver, in the sense that the liver has to work that much harder. Whereas if it is free from the burden of fats coming into the body, then it can really effectively do its job on a deeper level.
Okay.
All right, thank you. We've got a few more questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I just conscious that if anybody else has a question, so maybe I'll take one more question and just see if anybody else has another question, if that's okay.
This one?
No,
Which one? This one?
mm-hmm.
The blueberries, obviously the ones that are mostly available that we tend to buy are often you get the fresh ones in the supermarket, but they tend to be flown enormous distance, and there's an issue there with the carbon issue with that. But the other ones you tend to buy are the frozen ones. You get the freezer section of the supermarket. What do you think about those? I guess they're not wild.
So no, they're not. They're never going to be wild. And really, when I'm talking about the healing benefits of the blueberries, I'm talking about the wild blueberries, because that's they're really a different berry altogether. If you ever get the wild blueberries, you'll notice that they're much smaller and almost blue-black all the way through, whereas the cultivated berries are much bigger and they're white on the inside. And they're a different species, if you like, with very, very different healing properties. So where we're talking about getting therapeutic benefit from wild berries, from the wild blueberries, then really it's better to be getting the wild ones. The cultivated berries, you won't be getting much benefit from.
Okay, thank you. I'll unmute us now.
Super.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Does anyone else have any questions at all?
Hello. Yes, I'm Leah.
Hi, Leah.
Hello. So many, but I'll just stick to one. You talk about, well, you're very clear that dairy foods are not helpful to us. I'm going off at a bit of a tangent now, but would you include kefir in that, which I'd understood was full of goodies for the gut? What's your view on that, please?
Sure. Yeah. So kefir, yes, I would include kefir in that, because it's still, although it's got the live bacteria in it, it's still a dairy base, and anything that is dairy base is a direct feeder of bacteria and viruses.
It's a direct what?
It's a direct fuel. It's a direct feeder of the viruses and the bacteria. So it doesn't matter that it's been, that it's got the live bacteria in it. You can get the live bacteria from other things.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for that. Okay.
Any other questions?
Yes, hello, it's Barbara here.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi. I have a few, so I'll just pick one. I understood that oranges and tangerines were quite mucus forming. Is that not so?
No, that's
Okay.
absolutely not my experience of them.
Right.
In fact, quite the opposite. They would be
Okay.
expellers of mucus.
Okay. And bananas too?
And bananas would not be, they wouldn't be significantly mucus forming, but they
Right.
also wouldn't be big expellers of mucus, if that makes sense. But they're incredibly potent digestive healers.
Right.
So they do have the ability to expel anything that's not needed in the digestive system out, which in a way would also include mucus.
Right.
But they're not the more traditional mucus expellers, say from the lung area, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I have one more, is that all right?
Yes.
Just about eggs. I mean, I'm a great lover of eggs. I don't have dairy, but I do love eggs. And is there, I mean, do you have a suggested limit on how many are still all right to eat? Because they're supposed to be a really miracle food as well, aren't they?
They probably once were.
Right.
And I know that so many people are very, very attached to their eggs. I really understand it. But the reality is that if you have something going on in the body, they're not a helpful food. And that's just the way it is. And anything on top of that in terms of our sort of emotional attachment to a food or what its healing benefits may be separate to the illness, we have to sort of put that aside.
Right.
Because it is the case that, you know, eggs have some good qualities and some good nutrients, but we can also get many of those qualities from other things. So it really depends. I wouldn't give a number on the eggs. I was someone who just had to eliminate them, for example, because of what I had going on. So it really is on an individual basis as to what you're contending with. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Pleasure.
Have I got time for a quick question, Rebecca?
Yeah, please.
I'm Tina. I'm in Oxford. Thank you very much for sharing all your knowledge.
Yeah.
And for offering this presentation today. When you say no dairy, do you include goats, sheep, both in liquid and cheese form?
Yes, I do, absolutely. Although sheep and goat are easier for the body to digest, it's once again, you know, dependent upon what you have going on in your body. So if you are contending with viruses and bacteria, which many of us are, then even the goat and sheep is not helpful. So obviously it depends on the severity of the condition. You know, the average person who might not be currently contending with too much may do well with a little bit of sheep and goat in their diet, and you know, it doesn't cause too many problems. But if there is something that you're trying to heal through, full stop, then even the sheep and goat is not helpful.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Is that all the questions? Super. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for being here today. It was really, it was a great experience for me to do this webinar over Zoom, and such a pleasure to share some of this knowledge with you. I really do hope it's been helpful. And if you have any questions at all, then you can, or if there's anything that you want to discuss in more detail, or how I can help you or somebody else that you know, then please just get in contact with me directly is the best thing to do. You can email me on, I don't think I put my email on the front page, so it's info@Rebecca, REBECCA -O'Reilly, OREILLY.com.